fair while since I was this excited about the future of Pixar, to tell you the truth. Probably since the 2010s when they were firing on all cylinders and managing to win awards and break the box office again and again and again. Since COVID though, I don't know what it was, I just wasn't having the same amount of fun with the films they were making. Don't get me wrong, a lot of them were still great, just having to go to Disney Plus for the first time viewing was pretty lame, to tell you the truth. And I wasn't a huge fan of Lightyear at all, really. I did enjoy Elemental, but it wasn't until I got the triple whammy in the last year or so that I felt the studio well and truly hit its stride again as a whole and really recaptured my attention. We had Inside Out 2, which was a revelation of a film and brought the studio back to its financial juggernaut status. Then came Dream Productions, which was a fun little miniseries that I feel was severely underrated. And then Win or Lose, which was some of the best Pixar content I've seen in years and had me on the edge of my seat for so much of the story. Suddenly, I'm all in. And they have an upcoming slate which feels like a good mix of charting a course for the future and doing new things, whilst also serving up nostalgia, which is a proven selling point in this day and age. We have Elio, which is coming out very soon, and which I'm intrigued to see, and then Hoppers next year, both fresh concepts. Then there's Toy Story 5, the big franchise, followed by Gateau, a new concept. Then Incredibles 3, then Coco 2 to round out the films with actual confirmed release windows. On top of that, we know that there are potentially some future Cars projects in the pipeline, but nothing more than that. So it looks like the studio is finding that right balance between innovation of new ideas and concepts and returning to worlds, characters and stories that people really love and want to see more of. Recently, in the last couple of days, we've actually gotten a fair bit of news and whatnot in regards to some of these upcoming projects, and so I guess that's what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to go through what we know and what we're seeing to try to get a clearer picture of how things are going to shape up. First things first, we now have a confirmed director for the third installment of The Incredibles, which kind of caught me off guard considering this has always been a Brad Bird franchise. That's what The Incredibles has always been. Yes, Pixar owns the rights and whatnot, but I'm pretty sure that this guy pitched the concept, then he wrote and directed the first film. He went away for a while, worked on a bunch of different projects, both animated and live action, and then he came back with Incredibles 2, which he once again wrote and directed himself. In the years since, though, he hasn't actually released anything. I think he left Pixar behind for a while due to the whole John Lasseter stuff, and he signed a deal to work on a film for Lasseter's new studio, Skydance, which is titled Raygun, which seems to be in production right now and thus is preventing him from coming back to work on Incredibles 3, at least as director. Because I'm pretty sure it's still going to be written by him. But no, he's not going to be helming this one, which is instead going to be directed by Peter Sohn. If you don't know who that guy is, he's been at Pixar for a very long time, and his most notable achievements have been directing 2 feature films. The first, of course, being 2015's The Good Dinosaur, and the second being Elemental, which came out more recently in 2023. At first, I wasn't really sure what to think about this news, to tell you the truth. The reality is that this has been Brad Bird's franchise for a good 20 years. Would it make sense to have it be taken up by somebody else? I mean, for starters, is this guy actually a decent choice to be a director of such a big-name franchise? I get that they're banking on the name Incredibles 3 to sell it, which it will, but he's never really had a huge hit by the standards of Pixar, has he? In 2015, The Good Dinosaur grossed a grand total of $332 million off of $200 million. Not exactly setting the world on fire with that. And in fact, I would argue it is a massive underperformance, especially for the time. Plus, the actual film is probably one of the most bland, boring things that Pixar has ever released. Is it bad? I don't think so. It's not on the level of Cars 2 or anything like that. It's just devoid of any sort of X factor, which is pretty damning. Similarly, Elemental is also a film that is underperformed. It doesn't have the same issues as A Good Dinosaur in terms of being not all that good, but regardless, it felt like it's a tier below the really great films in Pixar's catalogue. Plus, like I said, not a huge box office sensation either, grossing $496 million off of $200 million. Should a director that's had such limited success be trusted with a big hitter franchise, especially when his own films just haven't been on that same level? Honestly, don't know the answer, but it does have me skeptical. Then again, I think we probably do need to acknowledge that in the end, the person who's writing the story, which is what matters most here, is going to be Brad Bird. If it comes out that he's no longer developing the story and screenplay, that is when we can know that we're in real trouble. Since having watched his films, he has a style seen across the likes of the Iron Giant, both Incredibles films and then also Ratatouille, which I think is going to be hard to replicate for somebody else. But beyond that, will this guy be able to replicate the directing style, the visuals, the shots chosen? I don't know. But looking back at his filmography, I have noticed he's worked with Brad Bird a lot. The first film he ever worked on was The Iron Giant, directed by Brad Bird. He joined Pixar and worked on the first Incredibles movie and even had a small voice part, which makes me think that they're probably somewhat close. It was the same on Ratatouille, except this time he got an even bigger voice part. By the time of Incredibles 2, he had a major come up in the studio and worked on the senior creative team, and thus would have been involved with the movie on some level. With all that in mind, I suppose you could argue that he is more than qualified to take up the baton of the Incredibles franchise and try to produce something that stays true to the feel of the first 2 films, whilst also infusing some new life into the franchise. The more I think about it, the more I've decided I think it might be a good idea. I really liked Elemental, and to be honest, I think it only suffered a bit at the box office because people were still rather cautious about going to see movies with how expensive it had gotten, and so they wanted to play it safe, go see proven commodities like a franchise film as opposed to a standalone concept. Plus, Brad Bird's writing it, and ultimately, I think that's going to help retain a lot of the original vibes the first two films had. Hell, apparently a lot of people disliked the second Incredibles film, so maybe they're salty that there isn't a new writer to go along with a new director. Maybe everyone thinks it would be a good choice to change things up. Either way, I think time's going to tell. Moving on from The Incredibles now, though, we do have a few other things to discuss. First up, I want to talk briefly about the newly announced film Gateau, which is going to be coming to theaters in 2027. The blurb reads, from Luca director Enrico Casarosa, the film returns to Italy, following a black cat named Nero. Indebted to a feline mob boss, Nero finds himself forced to forge an unexpected friendship that may finally lead him to his purpose. Not really much to go on to tell you the truth, other than the fact that concept art looks awesome, and I hope they maintain as much of that sort of vibe as they can when they put it into that CG animation style. It has this beautiful, almost comic or graphic novel style that's so warm and inviting. I actually really like the concept. Animal films are always bangers, although I did chuckle when I saw they were going to have a film set in Italy and they were instantly going to the mob boss, because of course they are. Digging into the blurb a little bit more, I wonder what that unexpected friendship's going to be. The art kind of gives off stray cat vibes to me, and in reality that's probably true. He's likely going to be presented as a bit of a scoundrel who lives on his own terms. He gets into debt somehow and has to pay it off. But who is that unexpected friendship, and what is this purpose? In terms of purpose, I think there's a good chance that at the end, he's going to become a house cat. A film in 2027 that implies a cat's better off being wild and free rather than being warm, safe, and well-fed would make me scoff. And it really does tie into that idea of finding a purpose, being a comfort and bringing love and joy to a family, most likely to a child, because that's a nice and wholesome way to end your movie if you ask me, and feels very Pixar. Thus, I would suspect the unexpected friendship is going to be one of two things. Either he straight up befriends a human, maybe even one that's capable of understanding him, or he meets a pet that's gotten lost, they team up and they both have to solve their issues together. Nero probably ends up betraying his morals to try to save his own skin, and then he has a change of heart and returns to save whoever it is. Roll credits. Regardless, I'm actually rather eagerly anticipating this film in a way that I feel like I haven't for a bunch of Pixar's more recent works, which, to tell you the truth, is a nice feeling. Kinda too bad it's still another 2 years away, provided they don't have to push it back again at some point. That's not all we had to talk about though. We also have a still from an upcoming film, Hoppers, which is set to release in 2026, and then we also had another piece of concept art for Toy Story 5 slated for release later that very same year. I guess we'll start off with Hoppers because it gives me a chance to actually look into this movie, as I simply haven't at all. Okay, so here's the synopsis I found. What if you could talk to animals and understand what they were saying? In Disney and Pixar's all-new feature film Hoppers, scientists have discovered how to hop human consciousness into lifelike robotic animals, allowing people to communicate with animals as animals. The adventure introduces Mabel, an animal lover who seizes the opportunity to use this technology, uncovering mysteries within the animal world that are beyond anything she could have imagined. I don't know, this gives me a lot less than the Gateau preview, to tell you the truth. It sounds like it's going to be supremely funny, I just hope they don't include some weird plotline where she somehow avatars her way into an animal body permanently and then falls in love. I know it's a ridiculous thing to think might happen, but it's just imprinted on my brain, and I'm deeply anxious about it. Regardless, it does look like it could be really good, and a big part of me thinks we're about to stumble into a new golden age for Pixar. It might even start as early as the release of Elio. I think the film has the potential to be slept on, but I think it's going to be really good regardless. And then we're set up for wall-to-wall bangers for the future. The last major thing of note I wanted to talk about today is the Toy Story 5 concept art that just recently dropped. Now, Toy Story 5 is largely a mystery to us as of right now. We know that it's going to involve the toys having to deal with a new existential threat that's taking Bonnie's attention away from them. Technology. We have previously seen concept art of Bonnie where it's the middle of the night and she's under her blanket glued to a screen whilst the toys watch on worried. Notably, Woody is in that image, so it seems they want the gang to come back together. We also saw an image of all those Buzz Lightyears from the back of the truck because it seems Pixar can't resist going back to the classic factory settings joke for Buzz Lightyear again and again and again. Get it, guys? This guy doesn't realize he's only a toy. Get a load of the idiot. I suspect that's going to be something that perhaps Woody encounters on his adventures with Bo. Maybe before he gets back to Bonnie's room to see the gang, like a goofy prologue or something. I think I'd be a bit disappointed to see them take up a huge role in the movie though. Then we come to the fresh artwork, which is of Jessie, who's slated to have a much bigger role this time around, keeping with her new sheriff status as one of Bonnie's favourite toys, alongside Buzz and Bullseye, talking to what seems to be one of those early learning devices. I mean, maybe it's just a tablet, but with the frog face, it brings to mind Leapfrog, doesn't it? So I guess part of the story is going to be that this technology is also going to be sentient, much like the toys, and is going to be monopolizing Bonnie's time. I kind of hope they add a bit of nuance here and don't turn the character into an out-and-out villain, and thus make the story a fairly contrived technology bad parable. There needs to be a middle ground that's found, otherwise I think it's going to seem somewhat out of touch with the modern world and kind of annoying and patronising. Like an old person ranting about the good old days and how modern kids suck, etc, etc. I am keen to see Jessie get built up though. It felt like she had so much potential when she was introduced in Toy Story 2, and then it never quite felt the same in 3 and 4. She was important, yeah, but she was definitely forced into a backseat at times, so I'm glad for this promise of a proper lead role. And so yeah, damn, Pixar is looking good right now. I'm so hyped for all these films, and I'm really hopeful they're able to pull them all off. Second Pixar golden age, here we come. But now with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of all this Pixar news? Has any of it gripped you? Is there any film in particular you're excited for? Maybe not. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.